Hello and welcome back to topic 6, human phys. Today we are going to talk about transport. Mostly this is going to talk about the heart, parts of the heart, blood, parts of the blood, and how all of that is helpful to us. So let's get started. Just as like a brief overview, the transport system transports things, obviously, okay? But it transports things via blood, and there are a lot of things that it transports. Oxygen being probably the number one thing that we need. Oxygen is important for us to be able to go through cellular respiration, to give us energy to do literally anything else in our body. It also transports nutrients, antibodies, different hormones, heat, CO2, and urea. Urea is usually transported out of the system, but it still needs to be transported from the kidneys and then out of the body. The components of blood, we're going to focus on these 4, and then we're going to really focus more so on RBCs today, erythrocytes, and then leukocytes we'll get into next time. So 4 main components: plasma, erythrocytes, which I will refer to from here on out as RBCs, red blood cells, leukocytes, white blood cells, and platelets. So the plasma dissolves or carries basically all components of blood, nutrients, wastes. RBCs are important for moving oxygen via hemoglobin, just like on the blood cells themselves. They're the ones that look like these little donuts. Leukocytes are white blood cells. They're important in the immune system. They deal with pathogens. They're found in lymph nodes, so lymphocytes, which are B cells and T cells. Again, all important for the immune response, and then platelets are responsible for clotting blood. If you get like a cut or there's damage to your cells or red blood cells. The heart itself is a muscle, a massive muscle made up of cardiac cells. It's specialized, and its job is to pump blood efficiently through the body. Okay, you need blood constantly or you will die. So that's the heart's job. Luckily, you don't have to think about this. This happens naturally. Imagine if every second you had to think, okay, heart, pump, and then again and again and again. That would be so time consuming. Luckily, the heart just does it. It knows what it has to do. It is an automatic response that's happening in your body. So, this is important. You will need to know these steps in this order and understand how blood actually flows. The right side is deoxygenated. That's why it's blue. The left side is oxygenated. That's why it is red. That is almost always how things will work, except for the few arteries and veins that we're like literally about to talk about. Okay, so the pulmonary arteries and veins are basically the only exception that you'll need to know. But typically when you see things in a picture, if it's colored blue, it means that it's carrying deoxygenated blood, and if it's red, it's oxygenated. So let's start from number 1 and go on down the list. So the vena cava is a massive vein that brings blood from the upper half of your body and the lower half of your body, the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, and they all come together to empty into the right atrium. That is this small compartment in your heart. I cannot think of the right word, but right atrium is on the top right side. It then goes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle does have a much more muscular outer ridge than the atrium. However, the right ventricle is smaller than the left ventricle. And that is because the right ventricle then pumps the blood from the ventricle itself through the pulmonary valve, pulmonary meaning lung, so through the valve, through the lung valve into the pulmonary artery, and then into the lungs. And then from the lungs, you get oxygen, and now the blood is oxygenated, and it comes back in through the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein will drop off this newly oxygenated blood into the left atrium. From the left atrium, it will go into the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. The difference here is how many strings are connecting, how many flaps you have in the valve itself. Tricuspid has 3, bicuspid or mitral has 2. From the valve, you are going into the left ventricle, which is much more muscular than the right ventricle. The reasoning for this is because the left ventricle has to pump everything to the rest of the body. It is much more necessary to have a ton of force behind this pump to get to the whole body than it is to go from the heart to the lungs, right? The lungs are right next to the heart, so you don't have to push quite so hard from the right ventricle as you do from the left ventricle. So from here, you go up into the aortic valve because it is the valve that leads into the aorta. You go into the aorta, which is the massive artery that is on the top of the heart. Whenever you see a picture of the heart, it's always like that huge one that like curves around the heart. And from there, it will go into a number of different arteries that will lead to the rest of the body. Coronary arteries are arteries that are found on the heart itself. They supply oxygen and nutrients to the heart because your heart needs just as much energy as the rest of your body. If you get a blockage, like a blood clot, on or in a coronary artery, that's called a myocardial infarction, and that is a heart attack. If a section of your cardiac muscle or your heart does not get enough energy, it will die. It is very, very important that these coronary arteries are clear, right? They don't have a ton of buildup in it, like too much cholesterol. It will cause a buildup in arteries. You don't want that. You want blood to flow freely in coronary arteries. That way your heart is successful and efficient at all times. So the action of the heart, pretty straightforward. Blood enters the heart via veins into the atria. You have a contraction in your heart, right? That's like a beat. It will push blood into the ventricles. Another contraction will push blood out of the heart and into the arteries. The tri- and bicuspid and semilunar and aortic valves are there to prevent backflow of the blood. You do not want blood to flow backwards through the path of the heart. That is very dangerous. You want blood to go in one direction and one direction only. Ventricles have thicker muscles because they push further and at a higher pressure, right? The atria just go from the top of the heart to the bottom of the heart, but the ventricles have to push the blood out of the heart, so they need more muscle and they need to push at a higher pressure. Your heart is set up as a double circulation, okay? You have a circulation that goes from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. That's one circulation. Your other circulation goes from the heart to the rest of the body and then back to the heart, okay? So deoxygenated blood returns to the heart and then from the right ventricle to the lungs to the left atrium, one circulation. Once it's oxygenated, it goes to the left ventricle, to the whole body, back to the right atrium. That's your second circulation. The vessels that you should be aware of are arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries always bring blood away from the heart. They have a higher pressure because they're bringing oxygenated blood to far places, right? Like the tips of your toes. Thick muscular walls, small lumen, which is the opening in the middle of the artery that blood will flow through. Valves at the exit of the heart to prevent backflow. Veins do the opposite, basically. Return blood, have low pressure, thin walls, larger lumen, larger opening inside. And veins also have valves throughout the vein itself. Because it's a low pressure, blood sort of just slowly moves its way along back to the heart, and so you have to have periodic valves to maintain that one-way blood flow. And then capillaries are the smallest. They will go up against organs, like into the kidneys, along the stomach. Like they're very tiny. They have low pressure blood in there, no muscular wall, typically 1 cell thick, so that you can easily diffuse nutrients, oxygen, minerals, ions, whatever it is that you're looking to diffuse. Easy diffusion, and then you can drop off all that stuff for whatever organ or muscle that you are bringing it to, and there are no valves in the capillary at all. The heart is controlled via nerves. So the heartbeat is due to myogenic muscle contraction. You have muscle cells that are, causing the heart to beat. You have a region in here where you have the sinoatrial node, which is the pacemaker, and it controls the rate of the heartbeat, right? So this is responsible for speeding up your heart or slowing your heart down, depending on if you need oxygen to be moving to your extremities at a quicker rate, or you can kind of fall back into like your resting heart rate. When you need to increase your heart rate, a wave of excitations is sent from that node, and it causes the atria to contract. This will pass on from the atria to the ventricles, causing them to contract onwards and onwards, which will increase the rate of your heart. This initiation, the myogenic initiation of the contraction, means that the heart doesn't stop beating. Okay? Because it is just like an automatic, you're not like consciously thinking of this, it just means that your heart will beat forever until you run out of oxygen, basically. It is indefatigable. Okay? Fatigue, hopefully you know what that means, right? Fatigue, if you're fatigued, you're tired. If it's indefatigable, means that it does not ever get tired. There's never a point where your heart is like, woo, I need a break. I've been working too hard. I need the weekend. Like, thank God it's Friday. Like, no, it doesn't ever think that. It just beats forever until you run out of oxygen, and then it dies. Okay? The histology of this, what would you expect? If it needs to constantly be moving, you would expect it to have quite a bit of mitochondria in there, right? You need a lot of energy to be doing this. All right, now the control of the heartbeat itself, as I've said like many times, it is automatic, and it is controlled by nerves. So it's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. When more CO2 is present in the blood, it's detected by the medulla oblongata, which is part of your brain, and it results in a nerve signal being sent to that node in the left atria to speed up the heart rate. Okay, so the medulla oblongata is like, whoa, 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 I don't want all this CO2 in here. Get it out, it's bad. I like oxygen, I don't like CO2, right? CO2 is a waste product of ours. When the CO2 levels fall again, the vagus nerve, which is one of your nerves on the bottom of your brain, recognizes that the CO2 levels are falling and we're going back into our homeostasis, and it will send a signal to reduce the heart rate. That's everything for today. Great job, and I'll see you in class.